Good evening and welcome to the fourth installment of the Momcology Caregiver Lounge. We're so glad that you're here with us tonight. My name is Layla. I have been a momcologist for about 5 years and have been honored to serve as Momcology's program coordinator for about the last two. My co-host tonight is Aubrey, who has also been a momcologist with you for several years and who you may also know as one of our Momcology volunteers as a yoga instructor for our weekly or monthly coffee caregiver breaks, and also a retreat house mom for those of you who have had the privilege to do an in-person Momcology retreat. So I am excited tonight to share this time with you and with Aubrey and with Greg. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Aubrey for a little more of our introductions. Thank you so much for being here with us for our Caregiver Lounge tonight, circling around the topic of hope.
Thank you so much, Layla. Thank you, everyone who is here tonight. I am very excited to be here with you. Before we get started, I want to do a few housekeeping things. Let's just get that out of the way, some notes. This webinar is view only mode, so don't be scared. We cannot see or hear you. Please feel free, get comfortable, arrive, be ready to hang out with Greg and all of us. So get as comfortable as you would like. We are going to break throughout the session and do questions. So throughout the presentation. So please do use that dedicated question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. You can use it for questions as you go through this. So when we have those breaks, we'll be able to address them with Greg and get them answered for you. You can also use it for any tech issues that may come up, which hopefully doesn't, but just in case. So please, again, use that Q&A part at the bottom for anything that comes up as we go. So next, I have the absolute honor to introduce Greg Hedler. Greg is a licensed clinical social worker, as well as holding many other holistic and leadership certifications. So we're very excited to have him with us. Greg has been in the pediatric oncology world for 18 years. He has been with Momcology for 7 years. We are so happy to have him. You may recognize him from other Momcology events or retreats. We're very fortunate to have his talent with us on a regular basis at Momcology. And anyone that has been able to have the pleasure of being in the same room with Greg, whether that is virtually or in real life, you will know that Greg is an absolute bright light in this world. He has a passion for supporting people, and he does it very well. We're very, very happy to have him with us tonight. And with that, I'm going to welcome Greg to our couch tonight for this Momcology Caregiver Lounge. So thank you so much for having me here. And Greg, we are honored to have you here. So yay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful and warm welcome. It is amazing to be back with Momcology in this way. And as always, I appreciate our tribe so deeply. This has been a place where I've gotten to meet some incredible moms doing the good work of being supportive of one another and of your families and, of course, your children. So thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation, which, lo and behold, is an amazing and exciting conversation to have around this concept of hope. It may be something that we use a lot, that we may say a lot. And here tonight, we get to actually pull it apart and we get to look at it a little bit. That what are we doing when we hope? And by the end of tonight, I believe that you will hope differently, that you will learn ways in which to sustain and nurture hope in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of yet. And so my goal is going to be providing you with guidance and support to be able to hope even better. So thanks for showing up tonight and being a part of this conversation. And in a lot of ways, it is a conversation. I will have polls throughout our conversation tonight that you get to interact with. And polls are anonymous, so you will not have any sort of attachment to what you offer. And it will provide us with insight and information and what I imagine to normalize a lot of what we experience when we practice this idea of hope. So to kick it off right away here, and my eyes are going to divert only to start the poll, I'm going to offer us the first poll that we are talking about tonight. And so here you have the opportunity to go ahead and click the poll that you see in front of you. So when you think about this idea of hope that we're talking about, how often would you say you use the word hope? How often does this show up for you? So you can see the various different answers there. Once a month, once a week, more than once a week, getting a sense of how do we show up in this way? Thank you for leaning in already and connecting with one another in this way. Amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Thanks so much. And I'm going to share the results here. So here we have it. So at least once a day is showing up as a high number, and at least once a week is our next high number in there. And we see variety showing up as how people use or understand this idea of hope, how often it is. From hardly to at least once a day, you may find yourself somewhere in this spectrum. So thank you for sharing a little bit of how you're already practicing hope and how we can kind of build upon that. When I think about this idea of hope, I believe a lot of it has to do with the context of our life. What is happening in the here and now that is leading me to have a level of hopefulness? What's going on within the context, my everyday, that either could elevate my need for hope, or actually it becomes maybe even more quiet in certain points and times. In my own little experiment, if you would, there was no IRB study involved in this, yet I, amongst groups of my friends and people in my world, began asking people myself about what do you hope for? And gaining a sense of where people could respond to this. And some had ready answers of what they hope for. Others struggled with what it is that they hope for. And they varied. It's just such a variation between everybody. If I then zoomed out a little bit further and asked a little bit more about the context of what they were managing in their life, what I recognized was that those who were having some level of crisis, some level of challenge within their life, their level of hopefulness or their use of the word hope was much more inclined. And for others of us that necessarily were in maybe an even-keeled space, that word hope was harder for them to grasp, harder for them to think about, because it may not have been as present. So in my own little experiment, I was recognizing that hope sometimes increases its sense of presence during times of challenge, strife, heartache, that hope becomes more present in those moments. And so in those moments, let's be curious to see where hope shows up for you. So this word hope, you might have already started thinking about sort of your own definition of what hope is. So when you hear this word, what comes to mind for you? And I know that it's not a call and response here tonight, yet for yourself, this is a moment of reflection to think about, how do you understand this word hope? What's the reason that you hope? Is there a reason, something that draws you to this hope in some way? And when we look at hope even further, what value does hope play in your life? We don't always pause to think about these other deeper questions that show up for us. And so I'm inviting you to kind of play with it for a moment and try it on for size so that you begin to understand how you're showing up with this concept and how it already shows up in your world. What's the reason we hope? What's the value of hope? What are the feelings and actions around hope? All of this is an opportunity for self-reflection. In thinking so, I have another question for you. And if you happen to have pen and paper at hand, or maybe even another computer screen to open or anything along those lines, I want you to also play along within the experiment right now. And I'm going to give us a moment here to pause and to do a little bit more reflection. So we're going to pull apart what it is that we show up with. And so if you have pen and paper, or maybe even your cell phone with your notepad or a Word doc, whatever it is that you have available, I'm going to offer us a minute here. And so I will hold silence for a minute. I'm present with you. And I'd like you to play with this sentence stem. I hope for. And I'd like you to fill it in. Whatever that is that you are thinking, whatever shows up right away, honor it, allow it to be here. It's meant to be here. If it shows up, say, there you are, great. take a moment, and I'm going to pause and time us here. Take a moment and come up with as many I hope statements as you are able to. I'm going to play along too, right here. I have my pen and paper ready as well, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to give ourselves a minute beginning right now. See what shows up for you. And thanks for leaning in and engaging and making this even more. Thanks, everybody. 1 minute. About 10 more seconds. And my teacher voice says, pencils down, everybody, pencils down. That's it. So you've listed maybe one hope, maybe a few hopes. It was a minute. You may not have generated that much, and maybe you did. Who knows? With that minute, certain hopes may have come onto the paper. What I'm going to be interested in is not so much for what you hoped for. I'm going to go ahead and populate another poll here. And what I'd like to kind of think about here is, what kind of hope were you focused on? If you look back over your hopes, did you see hopes that were more for you, more for your child, more for a family member or partner? Was it more for a friend? Or is it in an other category altogether? Thank you for all of this. Yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, lovely. Another moment here. If you've not done so already, please feel free to join. Thanks, everybody. If I were to look through my hopes, one was, I hope that this webinar offers opportunity for success for both you and I in this moment. I was hoping that this weekend I'm actually going to take a trip, and so I was hopeful for safety and a smooth flight. My sister just shared some news, and I hope that she remains well. And I hope that the weather stays beautiful as it has been in these spring moments. Those were some of the hopes that I'm willing to share with all of you. And you could hear that some were for me, some were for others. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I don't think that you will be overwhelmed to discover that a lot of our hopes that we have generated in our room today is in regards to our child. So again, situational influence, is that part of what we begin to hope for? I'm not sure. It's being able to be proven, though, as we continue this experiment. Some of us had hopes for ourselves, and some maybe for even another family member. So thank you for again, engaging in this dialogue. I'm going to go ahead and stop that. So when we think about hopes, I want to kind of bring this even to more awareness for us, is that there are values and benefits to the way we hope. And when we look at the categories, I think I find this to be really, really fascinating, is that when we hope, we actually are hoping for 3 different things. These are the main categories that show up when people foster something called hope. That one, that lots of times when we hope for something, it has something to do with attachment. And attachment here is this idea of like physical proximity in some way. Like, I hope I get to see my grandmother soon. My grandmother lives 6 hours away, so it's not something I get to do often. So that hope is about attachment. It may be a sense of intimacy, a sense of connection, or an opportunity. I hope this date goes really well. All of this may be also around emotional bonding. I hope to experience love. I hope to experience the sense of excitement. It may have some level of emotion to it. And it also may also have something to do with our connection to the universe, whatever that spiritual sense of yourself is. Lots of times hope lives in this sense of attachment to the belief, something bigger. So attachment may fall into that category. So when I named my sister, Now, granted, I have some insight into this before I took the test, so to speak. But when I think about my sister, that's an attachment, that's a bonding, that's a relationship that I'm honoring in that moment. Sometimes we also hope for mastery, meaning that there's an accomplishment or an achievement or a sense of productivity that shows up. And so we might hope to be successful at something. And as I gave my example, is that I hope I am successful at this webinar today. And so that sense of hope is about the mastery of something. I hope I pass this test. I hope I do really well at the game. All of those hopes around this sense of mastery. And the last one is about survival, and that we might have a hopefulness around this. And perhaps what I'm going to imagine and have a story around from what we saw within our poll is that some of us have this hope around survival, this idea of being able to overcome challenges in some way, abilities to move through senses of loss or anxiety, ideas of what is protection, what can I hope for in regards to that. And so some of your hopes may have been in terms of that type of hope, of survival hope, whatever that may look like. It can be a scan, it can be a treatment, it can be an admission, it can be the overall arch of cancer. That is a different hope than mastery and attachment. So when we look at these three hopes, we also then begin to see the benefits that come from hoping. And I also think this is really great to see outside of our own mind for a moment, to say, when I hope for this, what am I really gaining from this? I asked during our first slide, what's the value of hope? And so some of these values may show up right now. Is that when I hope to do really well on something, that may motivate me in some way. That brings more action to the effort that I'm putting forth. So again, if I may say an example around like, I hope I do really well at the baseball game. I then may from there gain the value of motivation, because if the hope is there, the motivation to do and practice may be even stronger in me. And so that hope is driving me towards something. It's the value, it's the motivation. Other ways of hope can also support us in our sense of well-being, our sense of reducing stress. When I hold hope, I actually begin to maybe relax a little bit. I may be able to be at ease to some degree, that knowing that I'm holding that hope actually gives me a sense of reduced stress. My grandmother's a lot on my heart tonight, it seems. And so when I do drive to see my grandmother and I go to leave, she always hopes that I get home safe. That's what she says. I hope you get home safe. And I know for her, that's an effort to reduce her anxiety about the drive in some way. So if I say, I hope he gets home safe, that makes me feel a little bit more at ease in some way. So we see, as we look through all of those different values or benefits to hope, we might have higher expectation because we hope. We might be able to find deeper meaning because we hope. All of these you might be able to connect to yourself in thinking of how you completed your sentence stem for hope and what was the value behind it. Were you seeking meaning? Are you seeking a sense of resiliency? Were you seeking motivation to do something? Now, there are times in which we hope for things that we actually don't have control over. And so when I think about that, I want to identify this as optimism. Sometimes hope and optimism get confused with each other. Excuse me. Something like my hope that tomorrow's weather is beautiful is actually optimism. There's actually not an ability for me to do anything that's going to make that any different than what it will be. So the difference, and I think this is a crucial piece to this, the difference between hope and optimism. Hope is saying that I have some level of involvement that's going to influence the outcome. I can do something. I am motivated, I become resilient, I cope better. There's an action-orientedness to hope. When we use hope in a way that we reflect, we don't actually have control. We don't have control over the weather. That is an idea of optimism. I don't have that same level of influence over the outcome. And there's nothing wrong with either of these. What is helpful for us to recognize, though, is that when I put all my hope in a sense of optimism, I may feel a lower sense of success. I may not be as motivated, or I won't be able to nurture or sustain it because I can't change the weather tomorrow. I simply can't. Yet if I hope for it and then it rains tomorrow, I could be less motivated. I could feel less hopeful because of it. So why does this matter? It is that when we hope, I want us to think about, what is my part in this experience right now? What is the part that I can play? Is there preparation that I do? Is there a reaching out that I create? Do I visit my sister more? All of those are actionable things that can really support or sustain my hope. Let's take that in for a moment. All of this mastery, attachment, survival, we can think about the category, and then from the category, we can think about, is this actually hope? Is there an action I can take? Or is it optimism? Optimism is okay. However, optimism doesn't necessarily have that same level of involvement that hope does. So as we're thinking about this, and those that have played in my sandbox before know that I really appreciate this idea of paradox, that there are two things happening that are true at the same time. What I want to recognize and give voice to as well is not only the sense of hope, yet also the reality of hopelessness. That there are times in our experiences that we feel this, myself very much included in this. I am not separate from, that there are moments of hopelessness, moments that feel heavier. These moments echo back to the same three categories that we talked about earlier: attachment, mastery, and survival. If I continue to fail on that exam, my sense of hope will slowly diminish. And I will begin to feel hopelessness because my mastery isn't being met. And so I experience that in some way. What I'd like to do for us right now is to actually identify how hopelessness shows up in our world and how it actually relates to the three categories that we're talking about tonight. So, oops, it's very sensitive here. So what we find is that there are moments of hopelessness that arise when we feel alienation. Alienation is directly related to that sense of attachment again. I'm not getting that sense of connection. I don't feel like I belong. There are moments where we might feel this hopelessness around forsakenness is what's happening. We are forgotten, we are abandoned. And in those moments of forsakenness, that is these ideas around attachment and survival. Forsakenness, we want to be a part of the tribe. And if that shows up, we may gain a sense of hopelessness. A lack of inspiration comes about through the same idea of mastery and attachment. I want to be good at something. I want to achieve this in some way. And perhaps my inspiration isn't showing up in that way. The idea of doom also comes about in all of this. And when we think about that, it's around survival. This idea of a negative outcome. And I may feel that. I feel it when I say it, it's on my shoulders. And so that hopelessness, I want to recognize where it's coming from. And it's about my sense of being able to survive in this moment. My despair might be large. Helplessness, again, is coming from that same sense of survivalness, yet it's also about mastery. How do I get myself through this moment? Do I have a sense of helpfulness? I don't know the way forward. How am I going to get there? Additionally, there are a few others, and I recognize that these might feel heavy. Energetically, they are. Hopelessness has a heaviness to it. I'm empowering us with this knowledge tonight so that when we experience moments of hopelessness, that we begin to actually understand where it's rooted in. Is there something around alienation right now? Is there something around my thinking, around inspiration or doom? Is it all about survival or attachment or mastery? So my effort here is to empower you so that you understand where that hopelessness may arise from, and then maybe then we can do something with it. Other ideas around, so there are 9 altogether in all of this. And so some others around this is this idea of captivity. And this is sometimes relational in nature, where we feel trapped in a relationship in some way. We feel captive, and that could lead to a sense of hopelessness, that we are allowing others and maybe even staying in a place of harm. So that again is survival and attachment. Powerlessness and these ideas mean that I have no influence. I have no power here, and therefore this is again around the lines of mastery. Oppression is this idea of attachment and mastery. It's not fair, it's not equal. This may be systematic in some way. And limited is that there's not enough resources. And if there's not enough resources, there's little ability for me to survive or for me to have a sense of mastery over even having access to this. So again, I will name, take a deep breath. Exhale it out. Heavy stuff. I recognize that. And I want us to be truthful in holding both hope and hopelessness in the same picture so that we can recognize where we have the ability to empower ourselves in these moments. What is at hand? What is happening? How is this showing up for me right now? When we recognize that, we begin to recognize our steps out of hopelessness and begin to taking the efforts to really address that sense of attachment, the sense of mastery, maybe the sense of survival. So my tribe, my friends, I want us to do one other poll here. And this is going to be around what we just talked about, is this idea of what type of flavors of hopefulness most show up for you, you think? What would you name as these areas that most show up for you? Feel free to take a moment and read through them all again so that I can name them for us, and maybe we can even strengthen our numbers around this. Yeah. I am celebrating your awareness right now. I am honoring your ability to name what this moment of hopelessness looks like for you. This is courage, my friends. This is effort. Thank you for this. Yeah, we have 23, 24 of our 26 present today. Thank you for all of this. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here and be able to share the results with you. So as you can see, we have similar vibes in our room right now. The powerlessness one came up really strong for us. And when we think powerlessness, this is the level of mastery over the situation or the effort or the experience that I'm having right now. So what that tells me is, how do I become more masterful over the situation in some small way that begins to foster greater levels of hope for me? What's one step that I can do this? One idea that comes to mind for me is when I have had the fortunate privilege to work with families in the middle of a diagnosis, right? In that moment of diagnosis. And I can recall when I'm speaking with these individuals as they digest a whole bunch of information, like I'm supposed to be mom and an LPN, a let's pretend nurse, all at the same time. Like, how am I supposed to do this? And that overwhelm that comes to them, thinking that I cannot do this. And we sit in that moment of powerlessness and think, I don't know, I can't master this. This is not something I can do. And I can offer support. I give space for that moment of powerlessness. I want to reflect and know that it's there and it's okay for it to be there. This is part of the learning curve in this moment. And so when we're able to then hold space, I then get to see parents, moms like yourself begin to step into mastery. I know how to read a CBC count now. I know how to give a steroid at home. I know what to do in the middle of the night with a fever. All of these begin to come into light where their powerlessness in certain moments begin to diminish because they're stepping more into their hopefulness of mastery. They may not know it in this way. You might not know it this way. And I may not have known it in this way until recently when thinking about what we're doing and working with. When I also thought about this, I recognized that maybe alienation and forsakenness might be really strong. And these moments are when I can recall again stories, maybe even with those in the room right now, where it no longer felt comfortable to be in relationship with certain people who didn't know what it was like to have a child with cancer. That putting the mask on and listening to things that didn't seem as vital or as important to me anymore gave me a sense of alienation, that I felt in that moment a sense of abandonment because my attachment was being changed in some way. This is an invitation for us to then think, where can I find that attachment? When can I find being seen in what I'm doing and where I'm living right now? And hence we're here in a space that fosters a sense of all of that idea of attachment and that sense of survival, because we're in it together in that tribal mentality. So in our hopelessness, there is answers to what it is that we get to do next. And we pull it apart and think about it, maybe in these three categories that can really bring about a sense of opportunity so that our hope can become actionable, not only optimism, hopefulness. Thank you for allowing me to share this other component, because I felt as though I would do a disservice if I didn't talk about this other component. That's the bigger picture. And I really believe that having that in mind may be able to get you in through those moments of feeling hopelessness at times, being able to decipher what really could I do in this moment that may shift me ever so slightly. I like to think of it always as penguin steps into another space. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your engagement. So, moving from that space of hopelessness and moving into an actionable state of hope, here we ask ourselves the question, well, then how do we hope, Greg? Like, what? Like, we've talked about some aspects, some categories of it. Well, then how do I go about hoping better? And so I want to talk to you about the actual skill. I don't think it's just happenstance. Like, we use it sometimes as happenstance. Children learn the words hope, then we become it ourselves, and we talk in words of hope. Do we know what we're actually saying? And do we know how to do it in a way that's going to make us successful? So I want to offer to you, I want to demystify hope tonight, because this is what's going to nurture and sustain you in this. So here we go. Hope theory. If this is of interest to you, Charles Snyder is the name that you want to remember. Charles Snyder offers us this concept of hope theory. And visually, I get very excited about this. So here in the middle, hope is a want. It is a desire. It's a want power is what we talk about. So that initial hope, however it shows up for you, whatever is on your list from before, that's a desire. That's a want power that has shown up for you. And what I like about this want power is that it means that I have some level of action or control over it. It's a want, therefore it's coming from inside the house. It's intrinsic in its way, meaning it's inside of me coming forward. So the want, the desire, is there. That's step one, naming and noticing the want or desire. The second part of this is then moving in to the idea of willpower. So once I have want power, I then move into willpower. Willpower in this way is my sense of agency. It is what strengths do I possess that enables me to go after the hope that I want now. Hypothetically, and I am being mindful of the examples I'm using some generic, some broad examples in all of this. I know that we all could make it very intimate too within this group, which we can do in the question and answer portion. So in the willpower state, say that I want to go back to school to, what do I want to go back to school for? Let me think. To get my master's in psychology. Like, that's what I want to go back and do. I want to get my master's in psychology. And so I decide that that's my want. That's my intrinsic desire. So then I think about my sense of agency. Well, what strength do I possess that enables me to go forward with this hope? Or what thoughts do I have that actually pull me away from this hope? That's my sense of agency. Can I go towards it or away from it? This is when we listen to that inner critic in our head that tells us I can or I can't. So my I can takes me forward, and it's my agency, my sense of ability, my sense of strength to go ahead and step towards that goal. Sometimes people hope for something. I say that I want a pony, yet nothing comes from it, right? Like, I have no willpower to go out and buy a horse or to learn how to ride, and therefore my sense of agency isn't there. So my hope just floats out there, no groundedness to it. So when I hope for something, I want to think, what part do I play? What strengths do I possess? What abilities do I offer? How am I motivated to do this? Am I in an I can state, or do I detract from an I can't state? I think of it as like learning how to drive stick. Like that's something that I've thought about. Like, wow, that'd be a really cool skill. I'd also buy cheaper cars. And yet I don't do anything to make that possible. The want is there, yet I don't do anything to really move that forward. I think I can't drive stick. That's a lot. So I limit myself, therefore the hope floats. The other next step in all of this is that when we hope, we can think want power, willpower, why power. Why do I want this thing? If I want this thing, whatever it is, really bad, I'm going to come up with pathways in order to achieve that goal. If I want to go back for my master's in psychology and I have the I can, and the why power becomes what I could offer to other people, what and how I could show up in the world even better, how much of a support I could be. And my why power shows pathways. Well, the way I could do this, because the why is so strong, the purpose is so strong, the pathway is I'm going to take out a loan. I'm going to pause my career in this direction. I'm going to take the time to move in with my family and go to school. All of those become the pathways which answer the why. The why then motivates us and shows us who is in my corner that can make this possible. Want power, willpower, why power. What are the pathways? How am I going to get there? What will take me forward? Finally, it's the what power of all of this, which is now clearly identifying the goal, getting very clear around this. So when am I going to go back to school? How specific can I be? Do I do it while I'm working? I get nitty-gritty about what it is that I want. Want power, desire, intrinsic, willpower, my agency and ability. Do I have it? Can I do it? Why power? This is how I'm going to do it. What power? The goal that I am after. Knowing that I have everything else first. Now, you certainly could work this the opposite way as well. What the reality is that hope is consistent of these four powers. If I want to nurture and sustain that hope, I want to become clear in all of these ways. If I miss one of them, the hope floats. It's not necessarily going to take root. When I think about what power and goals, I want to offer us another idea here. That sometimes we create hopes in our head that are avoidant hopes. Avoidant hopes. I hope that cancer doesn't come back. That's an avoidant hope. And those types of hopes are harder for us to build around because it's about avoiding something. So what we really want to begin to think about is how can we word our hopes in desired-based hope so that I'm moving towards the thing that I want, because then I am more activated to then go towards it. That gives me clarity. Oh, this is what I desire. Because the brain doesn't work in can'ts or nots. It's really hard. When I say like, I don't want to do something, only when if I say, I don't want to eat ice cream tonight, all I want to do is eat ice cream. So that's not really a good hope. I hope I don't eat ice cream tonight. My brain is only hearing about the ice cream. And so now I want some mint chocolate chip ice cream. And so therefore avoidance goals don't have much teeth. It doesn't really stick as strong because I can't build on it. Yet if I say, I hope that I drink a lot of water tonight. I hope I go to bed with a protein shake. Like those become realities. Those become ways in which I can say, what is my agency to make that possible? What is the way I'm going to do that? The clarity of my goal is I'm going to drink this protein shake before bed so that I can satisfy my craving for chocolate. All of this becomes a deeper level of hope. This asks us to kind of stay in the space of what it is that we want and being really clear about it. Can I get some hearts and hands up if this is resonating with you at all? I need a moment of connection with you all. Is this giving you value? I'm just checking in with all of our studio audience right now. Okay, I needed those hearts. Thank you so much. So keep this in mind. What power, willpower, why power, what power? So from here, I want to foster also this sense of building on what we just talked about, And so how do we become a high hoper? How do we do this? Keeping in mind the what, the why, the will, and the want. What I'm offering to you is to do deeper work around what I think of and as what David Cooper-Ryder talks about as appreciative inquiry or an appreciative approach, which means you either have somebody in your life, like a social worker, a coach, or somebody in your corner that asks really good questions that begins to foster your understanding of your hope a little bit further. Working with families, it is one of my favorite things to do is to ask questions that bring light to the hope that this person has. And we do it by asking really good questions. Now, what you see in front of you is sort of a sliding scale. The yes and no questions on the left are not strong questions to ask somebody. You're not going to get a lot of value for your buck over on the left side of these questions. As the scale moves to the right, if you play in a field of whys, what ifs, hows, and whats, you're going to get so much more value here, and you're going to become more clear around your what power, why power, will power, and want. So I like this little scale here to show us where do we get the most for our money? To the right side of the scale. How do I become a high hoper? I work with the right side of the scale. What if I learn to drive a stick? I'm opening up to possibility. I'm opening up some pathways. I might be driving my what as my willpower. So some questions that I'm offering to you, not to overwhelm, to give you a sample here, is these questions. Why is this important to me? Why do I even care? That answers that why power question. That gets me really clear about the pathway. That tells me this is important to me because, so what will I do? What is possible here? Who cares? That gives me a sense, again, there's a pathway there of support, and the what is possible is the goal that I'm setting for myself. How can I ask for what I need? That, again, is this ability to be really clear about my desire. When can I share my need? All of these questions allow for hope to not just be something we toss out into the air, something that we actually have a part in, that we can create meaning around and deepen our sense of presence to. So I offer these questions. There are many more that we can play in, and this is sort of kind of like a taste. What could these questions be like for me? So certainly take a moment, think about them, what strengths and abilities. And a lot of times, if we really go deeper here, is that these questions relate back to attachment, mastery, and survival. So the hope, the categories come back even in the questions. That's going to show up here as well. That's how deep these categories run. I think that's just a fun connection to make here, that our powers all align with the three categories of hope. As we continue forward here, I was just checking my time. I have some more that I want to pour into you all. Chris Feutner may be familiar to some of you. Chris is somebody that actually works at the Children's Hospital. And before I even knew that he worked at the Children's Hospital, I am a student of positive psychology. I have a postgrad in positive psychology, and it has really informed how I show up in the world, how I practice. And Chris was one of the people that I had learned about while I was in my postgrad. And Chris talked a lot about hope, and it was part of our manual, it was part of what we were learning. And so when I found out that he worked within our palliative care group here at CHOP, I became very excited. And then not only that, is that when our conference for pediatric oncology social workers was held in Philadelphia, he was one of the keynote speakers. So I've gotten to hear Chris speak. And then since then, because I work at CHOP, I've actually been facilitating groups that he was in at points in times. It was hard not to be starstruck and excited, let me tell you. Well, one of the things that really I held onto and I practice as a social worker is thinking about this term that hope is like water. I appreciated this concept immediately when I heard it. And when we think about hope is like water, you might be like, some pictures or some images might come to mind or some effort to understand, well, what does that actually mean? So I want to walk through this idea with you to get even clearer and more supported around this idea of hope. So all this is Chris's work. So there's a solid state of hope that shows up with us. There's a solid state where hope can be like water, and in this form actually can become concrete. So in a solid sense of hope, what we're talking about is, what are you hoping for? I'm going to walk through an example. It may trigger, it may touch parts of you that are real as well, and I'm going to be mindful of that. So take breaths, do what you need, feel comfortable, take sips of water. I'm going to do so now. This idea of a solid state of hope can really be showcased in the idea of, if I were to ask a family, which I have, is what do you hope for? Some of what we did before. And they come back and they say that in that moment when their child came through the ED, I hope this isn't cancer. That's a solid hope. That's an outcome-based hope. That is a fixed hope. There's a real clear specificity to it. This is the solid hope that I have. I may hold that hope and acknowledge it, and then ask the question, well, what else are you hoping for? So we acknowledge the hope, and yet there's more hope. There's smaller hopes inside the bigger. And the smaller hope is possibly that if it's cancer, I hope that it's treatable. And then we live in that sense of treatability, and we live in that space of a solid hope again. And we can keep going in this direction. Well, what else do you hope for? And then the hope might turn in, I hope my child can get a good night's sleep tonight. And then that hope, that smaller hope, becomes actually something we can do, something we have action around. And then from there, it's like, okay, and what else are you hoping for? Oh, what else am I hoping for is, you know what, I'm really hungry and I hope I get a meal tonight because I haven't eaten all day and I don't think that's helping any situation whatsoever, right? Even more actionable. That's something we can do. Way power, willpower, want power, what power. This practice, what else are you hoping for, is a phrase that I fully offer to you to even use with yourself, to begin to strip away at points, what is deeper? What is underneath? What are the smaller hopes within the bigger? Because what I find in my own life is that I may make a big, bodacious hope that I put out there, and it has no roots. And so therefore, it's something that's more optimistic. Some of those hopes, I hope my child doesn't have cancer, is an optimistic moment. That it's not hopeful or doesn't have that level of hope because there's no action involved in it. Yet it's optimism, and optimism is good. I don't want to dispel optimism. It helps us. It pulls us forward a lot of the times. Optimism is valuable. It is different than hope, because hope is actionable. Hope is something that I myself can do something about. So in working with families, and I've sat in moments, hard moments, end of life moments, diagnosable moments, change of health moments, everyday moments, what are you hoping for? And then what else are you hoping for? What else are you hoping for? What else are you hoping for? I do, I want, I will. We keep pulling back the curtain to realize, wow, there's so much more here. With one family that I had been working with in a transitional moment of care, they were really hoping for the best possible outcome. And we lived in that space together, and we played in that space, and I can still see this conversation happening. And I used this tool, sat there. And when I say I use this tool, I mean it came from a sincere place and a want to support this family. And as I listened to the hope that initially came out of their mouth, I then heard it and held it, acknowledged it, and then went to the next moment. Well, what else are you hoping for? We continue to peel all of this back, acknowledging each of the hopes that were present in that room, honoring and giving them space, and then asking, what else are you hoping for? What we finally got to is this moment where she said, I hope my daughter can go have the biggest ice cream that she possibly can have. This was a child who was on G-tube feeds or NG feeds, and that was a hope. And that hope felt possible. And that was a hope that we could cultivate that day, because when we were able to experience that we achieved what we hoped for, guess what? Hope begets more hope. It means the experience that I just had can lead me towards something else. So we acted upon that one hope, because it was, of all the hopes, one we actually had ability to do. We did it. And I can still see that picture of that little girl in the car seat holding the most gigantic ice cream with all of the sprinkles possible and it all over her face, right? Whether she finished it or not, she got it. And that became something that we both remember. So hope is small and big and big and small all at the same time. It has many components to it. That's the solid state of hope. When I think about hope in another way, this kind of gaseous state of hope, I know that sounded funny, the gas state of hope is one that you may think about in terms of what it feels like. It kind of moves around, and in some places it's stronger than others, and it may move and change shapes, and it doesn't have the grounding that a solid hope does. And that type of hope is what gives you hope. It's what your optimism is. It's what your hopefulness is living in. It's a feeling of excitement or expectation or possibility. It morphs and changes. And so this, what gives you hope, when I talked about tomorrow being a beautiful sunny day, I hope that tomorrow is beautiful. It gives me hope to see what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm pointing to my window, by the way. And so that kind of gives you this sense of hope. And so I want to recognize that that's this gap state of hope. It's optimism, it's hopefulness, it's valuable. Like I said, we want to have these types of hope as well. And I want to recognize there's a part that I don't play, and I can be optimistic, right? Sometimes we think about this and like we see a friend and we're like, I hope I get to see you real soon. It's an optimism, it's a hopefulness. It may not be the actionable, solid sense of hope because I'm not making plans, yet there's an optimism to it. It's a sense of connection. It's really great to see you. I hope we get to do this again. That would be gas. That's moving, changing. It's amorphous. It holds only for so long and it dissipates. It goes away and new come in. So it changes state very quickly here. That's like the gaseous state of hope. It's a glowing feeling. We can think for ourselves, what gives you optimism? What gives you hopefulness in some way? It's a feeling, it's a vision sometimes. I think about that too, like the excitement of seeing it. That is this state of hope. And lastly, there's a liquid state of hope. Of all the states, I would say this is the one that is challenging. This hope is difficult because just like that screen, it moves, it changes, it's harder to hold. Unlike gas, which is light and lifts and keeps us optimistic, watery states is kind of like, oh, how am I gonna, it's like one of those toys, that the wiggle worm toys where you squeeze one end and it pops out. Like, it's harder to hold that because it's filled with water, and it's harder to hold this type of hope. When I think about this type of hope, it becomes sort of a what-ifing way of hope. It's harder to think about. And what-ifing, when we get into this space, what if this goes wrong? What if I don't get home? And our hope here is connected to an anxiety a lot of the time. Our hope is about avoidance. What if this happens? That again, like I said before, those types of hopes aren't really rooted in much. It's harder to figure them out because this type of hope may erode. It may change shape. It may only be held in the moment and then it loses its shape. And so it's harder to grab onto. This hope gets away from us because our anxiety starts to play a part in this. If we go back to the idea of that sense of alienation that we talked about in our hopelessness space, I want to connect it to this because in that moment of feeling isolated and alone, what if it's always going to be like this? I hope I'm not alone always. Yet that hope is based in an anxiety of some kind. It's based in that fear that's showing up as well. So this liquid state of hope is a harder one to hold. And it's nice to also recognize for ourselves when I'm playing in this what if anxiety space of hope. Because here it feels, I don't know, I just got an image of like, it feels kind of like an upset stomach where it's just like, whoa, like all of this liquid just moving around. And this hope doesn't always nurture us the way that solids hopes do. And yet this is something that we also want to recognize when we're hoping or what ifing in this way and efforting to avoid something. This type of hope is harder. It's not as valuable or rich in the nurturing part, and it's much harder to sustain because it doesn't have any level of solidity to it. These types of hope, naming these three, really give me a sense of, again, what am I hoping for? Where does this fall within my possibility? Connecting to all that we've learned so far tonight. I have only one more slide that I want to offer to you. And this is recognizing what I want to share is hope is fostered. I want to share with you in these final moments together how we foster hope. I believe that at this point in our conversation, you are having a really clear sense, even maybe more sense of what hope is like after our conversation so far. I want to drive it home through the work of Dr. Chan Hellman, and they are a professor of social work at the University of Oklahoma and also the director of the Hope Research Center. So Dr. Hellman has spoken about the idea of what it is to foster hope, what's required. And so I have brought it down to these 4 things to give you a sense of all of this, and I want to give it to you right now. Ways to foster hope, how do I bring this hope forward, is 1, imagination. And I see myself driving that stick shift. Do I see myself on a warm beach somewhere this summer? I begin to imagine, to ignite my desire, to bring to light what it is that I want inside, and I begin to imagine it in some way. That begins to set my hope on fire. That begins to bring it to life. So if I can imagine it and I begin to see it in some way, that might be the way in which I create it. Imagination is key. Can you be playful? This is a challenge for us adults because we think imagination is only for the children. This is why I love Disney World so much, for many reasons, and this being one of them. It reminds me that I can imagine regardless of my age. How often do we play in our imagination? How often do we imagine, even more challenging, everybody, how often do I imagine a wonderful experience? That's curious for us. Or is my imagination about something harder? Second is that intrinsic desire. Do you feel it in your belly? How do you identify this hope, and how can it pull you forward in such an actionable way that you're willing to know that you did what you could to make this hope real? That want power that we talked about earlier, is it an intrinsic desire? Check with yourself. So when you say to somebody out of nicety, I hope we see each other again, say, that was an intrinsic desire. That goes against my ideas of hope. So I'm going to hold on that word hope and say, let's talk again. I am very cautious now. I don't say to people, I hope you have a good day. Because actually, I don't have any influence over their good day or not. I really don't. So I've taken hope out of my vocabulary in this way, and I've replaced it with the word may. May you have a good day. Because that places the power onto the person, not my hope. My hope doesn't really matter because it doesn't have any legs, because it's not anything that I can do to really change that for you. So may you have a good day, or may you create the day that you want. Those are much more of my phrases, because hope for me is something that I can influence and change. So intrinsic desire. The next is experience. When you can do something the first time, so if I went and learned how to drive stick, and I successfully moved through the gears and the clutch all one time, and then the next time I did it, the car stalled and I wasn't as successful. My experience prior allows me to hope that I'll get it again, that I can do it again. You're playing basketball, you hit one shot, you miss the next 3, your hope about you doing it again comes from your experience of having done it one time. So our experience is something we also want to cultivate around hope. Can we achieve parts of hope that we want? The smaller hopes are really good motivators. What are those smaller hopes to foster? And the last one, and I find this from the work to be so much of what we do here, is this idea of social being a gift, social gift of hope. When we're in numbers, we can cultivate greater levels of hope for one another. And guess what? That is what Momcology does for all of us. It provides a sense of social gift to say, I've been on retreat with all of you. I recognize when hope shows up. I see you in group. I see you interact with each other. Even now, through the hearts, this is a social gift that fosters hope for us, that we can do it for one another. So when we name our hopes out loud, it's a gift to be able to do that in a social space that says, yes, I am a yes to your hope. And I'm going to be here to foster your want power, your will power, your why power, your what power. social gift. So share the hope that you have and allow others to be a part of it with you. That is one of the most powerful things Momcology offers all of us. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on something that I feel so deeply about. And so I leave you with reflection questions just as we began, is what do you deeply hope for? When you sit with this, what do you deeply hope for? What sustains and nurtures your hope? Perhaps you've recognized it in our conversation today. And how will you grow that hope in yourself, for that sense of possibility? One final poll, because I like polls now that I know them. And this final poll comes from the idea of what shifted for you through our conversation today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll right now. What shifted for you through our conversation? I want to honor and celebrate that shift for you right now. So go ahead and think about it. I know they all sound similar to one another, and yet they're different. And you might resonate different with each of them right now. Thanks so much for giving me your insights around what this has been for you. Lots of times we experience moments of life, yet we don't recognize the shift that it mattered. And so this final moment is to say that this time we spent together has mattered to you. You claim it for yourself and only for yourself. And so I want to showcase what this was as we end today. So what we find is that there's been some nurturing of hope in our room today, some fostering of hope in our room today, and understanding of the sustaining of our hope. That I honor and celebrate with each and every single one of you. Thank you so, so much for all of the opportunity to share this with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
My pleasure.
So I have to admit to our momcologists who are attending and watching tonight that I actually got a little preview of this working with Greg and planning for you all. And I still, Greg, thank you so much. Even having gotten the preview, having seen your notes before, just frantically taking notes, trying to absorb it all and soak it all in. So thank you. And it's such an eye-opening idea to think about the difference between hope and optimism, right? And what are we wishing for versus what are we actually able to take action on? You're going to have me thinking about that for quite a long time. So if you are watching us tonight and want to give Greg a round of applause, we can't hear you, but please feel free to go ahead and give him all the claps and your reactions or anything that you would like. So Greg
I love
and Aubrey
seeing,
and I,
oh yeah, it's like I love seeing the hearts and the clapping and all of it through the whole thing. I love it.
Yeah. So we're excited to take a few minutes tonight to dig into some of the questions that you all submitted throughout the evening. And if you have a few more, there's still some time to put them into the Q&A box function that we have there. So feel free if you would like. But Greg, there's some in here that echo things that I was thinking as well and jotting notes about. So I'm gonna throw out the first one to you and ask how do you answer this question concern, if you will? Would I hope the cancer doesn't return? Would the positive statement for that, would we reframe that as I hope to remain healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Does that look like in the context of caring for our kids?
Yeah, that is knowing our group, our tribe here. I think that's an incredible ask to think about. Lots of times we hear, I hope the cancer doesn't come back. I hope that doesn't have to, I hope there's not a relapse. All of that is sort of within that category of avoidance. It's the not part of it. I don't have control necessarily over that reality of whether the cancer comes back or not. However, I do have control or more control or influence over I want to stay healthy. Wanting to stay healthy then highlights an actionable way forward. I may not be able to answer this, right? That is not possible because that's not necessarily determined by me. However, I can do all the things. I can do the follow-up. I can choose to remain an active lifestyle in some ways that feel good and right to my body. I can follow up with the proper medication or the PT or however that is, because those are streams towards healthy. So that is the hope that we want to foster more of, because I actually can feel motivation from that, as opposed to the other one, which it floats. It doesn't have much more.
I love everything that you're saying. I think the audience does too. And I love how throughout you use the words offer and may, and like I'm taking notes as we go, but I think all of these are really nice ways of reframing or retraining how we approach these things to, you know, to get through our day-to-day lives on a normal basis. But I think also what this audience deals with, I think retraining ourselves to be kinder to ourselves and use the words may and offer. It's just a nicer way. And I just love how you put everything out there. So thank you.
Thank you. I am very much of a permission language.
I love it.
Here. It's all there. And when I was listening to you share that, Aubrey, I was thinking about how much that idea of compassion comes into play here, because I show myself more compassion for creating hopes that I can actually experience, and I have more kind of excitement about life, or more optimism shows up because I'm meeting those hopes. I'm doing something with them, and they actually are very much driven towards self-compassion, versus sometimes that other languaging could make me feel not as great. It doesn't pull me forward at all because it's so heavy, or so something that I'm not actually influencing, so I feel powerless. And we go back into the hopelessness now in a different direction, even though we were hoping for something.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, you know, exactly what you're saying, but then also even the offer of, you know, when you said compassion even obviously for ourselves, and speaking to yourself like you would a friend. And so much of everything that you said tonight were probably things we would offer a friend of ours, but yet not ourselves. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Layla, do you have another one, or do you?
Yeah, I see we've had a couple questions come in, so hopefully I'm going to get these out smoothly for you. But Greg, so where do we put all that energy, and how do we retrain ourselves to shift from that hoping for healthy days, clear scans, that the cancer doesn't come back, right? All those things that we have no control over. What do we do when so much that we think, say, do is based on, you know, on that hope, that in thinking through what you've said today and thinking about hope theory, what we're really maybe talking about is optimism, right? How do we, and I guess to build on that, how do we shift a little from that optimism, that completely out of control feeling, to hope and taking control over the pieces that maybe we can impact, that we can take action towards those hopeful wishes?
Yeah, it's another great question. Thank you for putting this out there and allowing me to articulate back. So again, optimism is a great thing to have. We have optimism because optimism sometimes lifts us up. It's that gaseous state, right? So optimism makes it lighter. It might feel hopeful in that way. So what we can practice in this moment around, I hope the scans are clear, using that as an example, if we were to take that, that's a solid hope, right? That can be solid. It can be that solid state. There's some optimism locked into there as well. And I would then ask myself, what else am I hoping for right now? And what I could get to in this example, and I'll kind of just jump into kind of answering it for myself, is like, perhaps I get into, I hope I get through the next hour managing my anxiety around, managing my scanxiety, right? I hope I get through the next hour, because then that tells me in this next hour, I could do something. I can call my momcology friend. I could jump online. I could do something that feels possible. So it's really, yes, I hope the scans are clear. It's not a bad hope to have. However, I would ask, what else are you hoping for? Maybe it's that my child goes, my child has a peaceful rest when they're doing the scans, or that they're able to be well distracted, or that afterwards we could have an enjoyable dinner together, regardless of that, like however it is that I can become more and more clear. Big hope, I hope the scans are clear. What are the smaller hopes that are possible within that one that I can get to, so that it gives me a sense of mastery or attachment or survival in that moment?
I love that, Greg, because I feel like some of the things that you just mentioned that we wouldn't necessarily think of as actionable, tangible things we can do to take that step towards what we're hoping for, are things that maybe we think of as rituals. I love the idea that we might have like that special meal. Like it's always we have a kid always picks what we do after the appointment, right? That's like kind of a thing, special planning for that meal, right? Or always the Starbucks stop on the way down to Philly. When Aubrey knows full well, right? We have a text thread that goes nonstop when we're anxious, right? We reach out to that fellow momcologist, the other mom who gets it. And that's where we get some hope, right? Or that's where we get some reinforcement or some support. So yeah.
Or using your words, Greg, that you said before, but like, pulls me forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
That, like those are those pieces. That pulls you forward.
Right.
I like this idea of, I hope a mom responds to my text, right?
Yeah.
Like that feels possible, and I can keep asking for what I need in that way, and somebody could respond and my hope was met, and that negates more hope. Now I can think, okay, what else can I hope for right now that's possible?
Mm-hmm.
I see a few more things coming in, Greg, and I think we have a few more minutes, right? So can I toss a few more your way?
Yes.
When we use hope as a replacement or placeholder for strong short-term emotions, anxiety, nervousness, stress, being flat out scared, terrified, right? Is it ever negative to put our energy into reframing and hoping, as opposed to dealing with those less than positive emotions or feelings? Like I think we can all agree that sometimes there's just tough, hard stuff, right? And is it ever a bad thing or negative if we don't really deal with the hard?
Yeah, I'm interpreting this question, and please help me or hold me accountable if it's different. Is this like using hope to bypass certain harder emotions? Like, is that what I'm hearing in the question? I mean, I'm always a fan of uncovering and managing harder emotions, because they're going to come up anyway. I can't hope my way out of anxiety if I'm not ever going to deal with anxiety. I can say, I hope I don't feel anxious anymore, yet if I don't deal with it, it's not going to actually be in service of myself. So using hope to mask something deeper or something harder that we're looking to avoid in some way, I don't believe that you're going to benefit from that in the same way, because the harder emotions are there for us and they're asking for our attention. And if you've ever kind of sat with me in any of our emotional intelligent conversations, is that emotions show up, they're asking us to move or do something with them. And if we are to negate them or not acknowledge them, they will find other ways to show up in our bodies, in our languaging, in any other kind of way. They're going to go somewhere if they're unmet.
Yeah, thank you. I think that addresses the question that was asked. We want to focus on positive things and reframing and all that, but to your point, if we're hoping for good emotions, we need to address that by working on the bad ones, right? And processing and working those out. So
And if anxiety is there and anxiety is showing up, going back to that scan example from row 4, if it's there, we don't necessarily need to hope our way out of it if that doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Sometimes sitting in our anxiety is also the right thing to do sometimes. That's what I always check with people. Is this a space you want to stay in, or would you like to change or move from this space right now? Because sometimes sitting in the harder stuff is part of the learning and part of the time that we need. And other times we might be moved to action, which is then the time to maybe generate some hope around that. Yeah.
Thank you. We have,
Yeah.
are you seeing some of these?
I just saw Erin's comment.
Yeah, I'm seeing
I
that.
was gonna say, I hope you see
have a
some of the
few, and I'm
positive
like,
things you're
oh,
getting. Great.
Yeah.
some of, right. I know you all can't see all your same questions. We're seeing some common themes. So I'm wondering, Greg, if you're also looking at them, if you
Yeah.
maybe want to sort of tell us the gist of what you're seeing and the question. Maybe you can summarize
Yeah.
them better than I could.
Erin, I'm resonating with you, and I do not play in a binary of emotion being good or bad. I agree with you that it's about energy. And when I think about it specifically, is that what would people perceive as negative emotions, I actually think of as depleting. That's an energy depletion. And so depleting emotions are heavier for us to hold. And so that is requiring me to like hold a lot of this, and I feel weighted by it. Positive, perceived positive emotions, I think of as repleting emotions. They're lighter for me to hold, and therefore I feel uplifted. I stand up stronger and straighter, and I feel like, this is a really lifting emotion. So it's a repletion of energy that I get from it. So very much same languaging as what you offered here. And I agree with you that I do not play in a binary around emotions, because emotions all have functions. And it's for me to recognize this is depleting, is this repleting? What's the energy that I'm feeling right now? What's the pleasantness of this experience that I'm having? That helps me to determine really what am I moving through emotionally in this moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Greg.
That's exciting. I was excited about that question.
I have one other one that I see kind of in the chat / came up for me as well going through this, is kind of the polite way of either reinstating or responding when you have someone's either not so positive statement towards you, or conversely, I think also a lot of times we are fielding well, just hope and pray and it'll all be okay, and like kind of not really acknowledging it. Like, what are your suggestions for both sides of those? Like someone's pity sort of statement for you / also, I know like this word is used a lot, but like the toxic positivity or the things like that, like in both ways, how do we convert what you've done here tonight to kind of have a response in our toolbox that we can pull out that both helps us process the buildup of some of that comes at us all the time as cancer moms, as well as, maybe not educate, but kind of like respond in a way that, man, I know that's a lot. Sorry.
No, I think I'm going to hold on to one piece of it and then.
Yeah. Sorry, I gave you like 17.
Yeah. Because what was showing up is you were talking about some of the pity languaging that shows up here, and it kind of goes in line with how I use hope myself now, is it's like, oh, I really hope you have a good day at the hospital today. Oh, I really hope that you get a good night's sleep. Here's a bold question or bold ask of all of us to do, is for me to become clear about what I want in that moment. I know I'm playing with fire here and asking you to be bold, everybody, that if someone says to me, I really hope that you have a good day, if we have the courage to say, what would help to make this a really good day? If you were able to pick up my children from school today. If you were like, this is like when people want to put that on us, that like, well, great, I'm glad you hope that I have a good day. However, this is what would actually make it a good day, or this is what actually would make this possible, is for us to boldly meet that with big asks so that we're actually then making that hope possible. We're making it actionable, not just optimistic in the other person's offering, right? So come prepared, people. That's what our
that is bold.
It is bold. I know. I'm playing with fire. It's and like you all deserve it. You all freaking deserve it. So like, figure out what it is and be ready to make the bold ask and say, yeah, you know what? What would really make this great is if you could go pick me up a cup of Starbucks right now because I got something else going on, right? Exactly, Sarah, right? Actions are going to speak much louder than words. So don't toss out something that now that's why I'm cautious with my hope for a good day for people. I'm realizing is that's why I say like, may you have a good
They
day.
might ask you back.
Help.
I love that. I love that. I think one of the few times that I actually came up with an answer for like, just say anything, what can you do? Right? Was like, how about a Starbucks delivery while I'm in isolation with my transplant kid? Right. So
And I would always say too, is if you don't feel comfortable saying that, find your spokesperson, find your friend that, okay, if that person approached you, find your kind of spokesperson that can go then and find that person and be like, hey, you mentioned this. Yes, Starbucks would be helpful. If you're not comfortable with it, I was like, I'm gonna make my friend that'll
it's
say
exactly the flavor I would like right now. Yeah. I have another one. I have a question for you, Greg, that's not showing up in the Q&A because it got texted to me separately, but it's such a good one. I want to make sure that we hit it, even if you're not seeing it. Is hope a bridge to pull the future toward the present and the present towards the future? And the second piece of that is, what is the difference between visualization and hope?
Okay. Can you restate the first part of it again? The bridge
Sure.
part.
Is hope a bridge to pull the future toward the present and the present toward the future?
Yeah. Snaps to that wording. That's amazing. Yes.
I wish I could claim it, but it's not mine.
It's so good. It's so good. I support this, right? Because that's what we're talking about, because that comes into the what power of things. It's the goal. What is the goal that I'm looking to seek or to achieve in some way? That most likely is future based. And so that tells me that in this present moment, there's actions I can take to make that possible in some way, shape, or form. So come back to that hope theory grid. That bridge to the future is the what power that's going to get me there, which is the clarity of the goal. And then the present is touching upon the path power or that why power that's going to drive me in that direction in some way. So yes, kudos to that wording of bringing the future to the present. Yes. The second piece I heard around visualization. If we take visualization and maybe change the word, connect it. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to honor your word. Visualization, I would connect with imagination. And so visualizing or imagining your future in some way, shape, or form is an igniter for hope. So I don't see them as different from each other. I see them as part of one another. That visualization, seeing myself in $1 million mansion and you know all of those things is going to ignite my sense of hope. That's going to then bring me into action of some kind to bring the visualization to life. That's that imagination piece. Great visualizers are great imaginators. That's what people get. That think about Imagineers again from Disney. They're great visualizers. They see something, they have a vision of something that gives them hope to then move into creation.
Well, Momcologists, we want to be respectful of your time, and we realize we're closing in on when we told you we'd be wrapping up tonight. So I do want to, on behalf of all of us at Momcology, Greg, I want to thank you so much for just such an amazing share that you offered us tonight. Thank you so much. I think it's fair to say that you have given all of us a lot to think about, to take action steps towards, and you've given us some tools to sit with and to work on as we walk this caregiver walk. So thank you. I want to thank Aubrey for jumping on as a co-host with us tonight. And I would like also to just invite all of you back to our upcoming Caregiver Lounge. We hope to see you back here on June 7th, where we will hear from Larissa Hewitt and Kelsey Hempstead from Dana-Farber Boston Children's, and they'll be talking to us about social support, finding it, making it work for you, and which I think is going to be a great follow-up to some of the things Greg hinted at in finding that support and connecting with those moms and things that we can hope for and make happen, right? So thank you so much for joining us tonight and being here. We are honored that you took the time to join us, and we hope to have you back in the Caregiver Lounge again soon. So thank you so much. Hope you all have a peaceful. I'm gonna let Greg close us up. How about some final words from Greg to send you off this evening?
Because you are a bright light in this world, Greg. The world's a better place because you're in it. So thank you.
Thank you for seeing it. Thank you for seeing me. And thank you for the permission to be a part of this tribe and be a person that walks with you all. And so I really appreciate all of that. May we all get together very soon in whatever way that looks. Until then, be well.